The Queen with All the Names. There once was a prince who lived in a kingdom far away. He no longer had a mother, but he lived a peaceful life with his father, the king. Their peaceful lives ended the moment a dreadful terror arrived. Late at night, they heard a terrible pounding on the castle door. The door burst open, revealing a beautiful woman standing outside. The woman was crying. "What is the matter?" the king asked.
"Oh, kind, generous king, would you please help me? I am a queen, Queen Griselda II. No, the third. I was traveling through your kingdom with all my servants and knights when someone attacked us. They killed my servants and knights, and they stole all my things. Now I have nothing, not even a place to stay. Can I spend the night here as your guest, dear sweet king?"
Of course, the king invited her in. He was appalled that such an attack could happen in his kingdom. The prince asked the queen where she lived.
"I'm from a kingdom far away."
"Our kingdom here is a kingdom far away," the prince replied.
"Oh, no, I meant that I live in a kingdom far, far away."
"What is your kingdom called?" asked the skeptical prince.
Abracadabra."
I've never heard of your kingdom before, and I've never heard of you either.
"As I said, it's far, far away. I am the queen there. Ask anyone in Abracadabra, and they'll know who Queen Brunhilde is."
The prince's eyes narrowed. "Brunhilde? I thought you said your name is Queen Griselda III.
"Oh, yes, right. That's my name, but my middle name is Brunhilde."
The prince did not trust Queen Griselda Brunhilde III, or was it the second? But the king felt sorry for her. Surely there would be no harm in letting her spend the night. The next morning, the king invited the queen to breakfast, but the queen said she could not eat breakfast with them. She said she had a bad habit of slurping her soup and would be too embarrassed. The prince assured her no one would mind if she slurped her soup. They could even eat something else if she was too embarrassed. Upon hearing this, the queen burst into tears, but still insisted she could not eat with them. The sympathetic king then suggested they would send food to her room so she could eat alone. The queen was pleased with his suggestion and immediately stopped crying. After breakfast, the prince demanded to speak to their guest. The king and prince met with Queen Griselda Brunhilde III. The prince tried to learn more about her, but the queen did not answer any of his questions. She kept changing the subject. Finally, the prince grew tired of it and accused her of lying. Abracadabra wasn't a real kingdom, and she wasn't a real queen. Again, the queen burst into tears. Of course, Abracadabra was a real kingdom, and everyone there knew her as Queen Sophronia. The prince whispered to his father, "Sophronia, that's not what she said her name was." The king whispered back, "It must be another middle name." The prince tried to convince his father that she was lying, but all the king felt was sympathy for Queen Griselda Brunhilde Sophronia III. The king said she could stay in the castle as long as she liked. When the queen heard that, she stopped crying. The queen stayed with them a long time. The king was honest and trusting, so he thought no one would tell a lie. The prince was honest as well, but he was not as trusting as his father. He did not believe Queen Griselda Brunhilde Sophronia III one little bit. Though the queen stayed with them a long time, she never ate with them. The prince asked why, and the queen answered,
Queen Calamari do not need to answer you.
Her inconsistent stories gave the prince headaches. Every time he asked his father to throw her out, the queen cried. Every time she cried, the king felt terrible and allowed the queen to have her way. Queen Griselda Brunhilde Sophronia Calamari III was allowed to stay and eat alone in her room. One day after her food was sent to her, the prince waited outside her door. He put his ear against it and heard sounds of her eating. He quietly cracked open the door and nearly gasped in shock. The queen had been sent a platter of steak, potatoes, soup, and beans, but that wasn't what she was eating. The prince heard crunching as she munched on live spiders and cockroaches. The prince knew of only two kinds of people who ate spiders and cockroaches: witches and little kids who had been dared. The prince realized Queen Griselda Brunhilde Sophronia Calamari III was actually an evil witch. Suddenly, the queen looked up with spider legs wiggling out of her mouth and saw the prince. The prince was horrified and ran to tell his father. But the queen was a very fast runner and caught up with him. She cast a spell so no one would be able to understand him. When the prince reached his father, he tried to tell him about the queen, but all he could say was, The prince then picked up a quill and began to write down what he had seen. He handed the paper to his father to read, but all the words he had written down turned into The prince tried to act out what he had seen, but no one understood him. So the queen remained at the castle, and the prince could not do anything about it. After some time, the queen told the king that she loved him and wanted to marry him. The king did not know what to do. The king liked her, but he knew his son did not, though the king had no idea why. When the king said he wasn't sure they should marry, the queen, well, you could probably guess what she did. She burst into tears. She gave the king her word of honor.
I, Queen Hildegard, promise to always love you and be a good stepmother to the prince.
The king believed her, so the following week, the king married Queen Griselda Brunhilde Sophronia Calamari Hildegard III. The queen did not want the king to be in charge. She wanted to rule the land herself, but she was content to wait a while. The king gave her everything she wanted anyway. Then one day, the king mentioned that his son was engaged to marry a princess. The prince and princess had been engaged since they were children. Now that they were grown up, they would soon be married. The king also mentioned that when he died, the kingdom would be inherited by the prince and princess, not the queen. The queen was furious.
Why wouldn't I rule? Don't you trust me? Your own wife, Queen Palatine?
The king assured her that he did trust her, but his son was next in line for the throne, not Queen Griselda Brunhilde Sophronia Calamari Hildegard Palatine III.
Who would want to marry a prince who can't even talk?
The queen asked. The king knew a lot of women who would want to marry him. The princess especially would. She and the prince loved each other so very much. The queen began to cry. She told the king that he must call off the engagement. The king wanted to make her happy, but he knew his son loved the princess. So for the first time, he told Queen Griselda Brunhilde Sophronia Calamari Hildegard Palatine III, no. The queen, who, as you may remember, is an evil witch, put a spell on the king. A cloud of smoke surrounded the king. Then, poof, he wasn't a king anymore. He transformed into a little sheep. The queen, however, soon remembered that she was allergic to wool, so she had to change the king into something else. With another cloud of smoke and a poof, he became a dog. The dog barked and growled at the queen. So, poof, she turned him into a rat. Except that did not work well either, because the rat began chewing holes in all her shoes. Well, a dog was too dangerous, and a rat was too annoying. The queen decided to change the king into something in between. After another poof, and the king transformed into a chihuahua. This creature was far more troublesome and annoying than anything else. So the queen at last decided she would turn the king into a frog. After another poof, he became a slimy frog. The queen laughed at him and said,
That's what you get for messing with Queen Patella.
No one could find the king, though they searched everywhere. The intelligent prince realized what happened to his father, but no one understood him. The people in the kingdom decided they must be ruled by someone because they couldn't make decisions on their own. Their new ruler became Queen Griselda, Brunhilde, Sophronia, Calamari, Hildegard, Palatine, Patella III. The queen canceled the engagement between the prince and princess. They were both heartbroken, but the prince had no way of telling her he still wished to marry. Under the queen's rule, the prince was not allowed to leave the castle. He spent his time taking care of his father. Sometimes the queen would create a new rule that said,
By order of Queen Tamina, everyone must eat frog legs today.
The prince always hid his father when people were looking for frogs to eat. Sometimes the queen would send snakes and birds to eat the frog. But the prince always protected him from Queen Griselda, Brunhilde, Sophronia, Calamari, Hildegard, Palatine, Patella, Tamina III. One day the prince learned that the princess, who he loved with all his heart, was marrying someone else. She was marrying someone that very day. The prince escaped from the castle, taking the Frog King with him, of course. The prince rode his horse all the way to the wedding in the other kingdom. He barged into the castle and interrupted the wedding. Mustering up all the love in his heart, he tried to speak. "Wait!" he shouted. Unfortunately, he still could not explain anything. The spell was too powerful, and not even true love itself could break it. The princess's father gave the order to throw the prince in jail for interrupting the wedding, but the princess convinced him to let the prince go. She ran to him and embraced him. When she saw the frog with him, she picked it up and gave it a quick little peck on top of its head. There was a poof and a cloud of smoke. The frog vanished, and in its place stood a chihuahua. Everyone yelled, "Ah! What have you done?
What is that? Change it back!
Change it back! Don't look at it!
Take it away!
Take it away!" The terrified princess did not want to kiss it again, but she summoned courage and kissed the vile creature on top of its head. After a poof, it turned into an ugly rat. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. The princess had heard the expression, "Third time's the charm," so she decided to give it a third kiss. She kissed the top of the rat's head. After a poof, it became a dog. The dog was so cute, the princess had to give it a little kiss. When she did, poof, there stood a sheep. Now more curious than ever, the princess kissed the top of the sheep's head, and poof, there stood the king. The spell had been broken. Not only that spell, but every other spell the queen had cast. The prince could now talk, and he explained everything that happened. The king immediately ordered the queen to be thrown in prison, but the queen ran away before they could punish her. The king's knights chased after her, but the queen, as you may remember, was very fast. She ran faster than the knights and their horses. They kept chasing, but she kept running. She ran all the way to the edge of the world. Then she ran a little too far and fell off. The king apologized to his son for not listening to him. The prince forgave him and eventually married the princess. As for Queen Griselda, Brunhilde, Sophronia, Calamari, Hildegard, Palatine, Patella, Tamina III, she was never seen again. The end.